why the changes that we began or we started doing, because they were so small pockets, if there was any movement forward, it was isolated to where it didn't inspire anybody else, or it didn't allow it to help anybody else with their movements. And so I guess going back to your question, there's so numerous names to mention, but there's not one outstanding name as it relates to the solidarity movement. It's been a movement amongst many people that will never be known to history, like maybe ourselves and the work that we've done over the years. Our names should be on that plaque, but there's no plaque. And so it's not about the recognition, because we don't do this for any recognition, and that's why there's not a plaque. But we want to enact some positive change that is substantial and sustainable. And so far, our movement has just fallen short of that substantial. And when I say substantial, not in pockets, but across not only the country, but everywhere we exist. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that. Very, very eloquent history, journey throughout history, learning about those practices and processes. Wahandran, do you want to chime in or tap in on this point?
Yes, wondering.
Wondering. My apologies. I'm gonna get it right. Like wandering.
Put it on the name on the screen. Put it the name. I would say that if just thinking back, I'm just speaking from experience, and for me, what influenced my work, I would say in living and growing up in Oakland, Bay Area, Oakland, California, I would say the Black Panther Party had a lot to do with the influence and the love that I have, and me being a product of the services and just the things that they did, just being for social change, for just all the organizing. We know the organizing that they did, and so it's for me, I would say, just to keep it just plain and simple, is that it was the Black Panther Party that has influenced my work. I've seen the work. I've been inspired by the work, the community work, the social change work, knowing what our community needs and fighting for it, and making sure that putting themselves out on the line for that, from crosswalks. I think looking locally at each community and being able to analyze your community and what your community needs, and then going after that together, is what has inspired me and influenced my work. So I would say that being a part of Oakland, and being privy to be able to glean from the Black Panther Party and other Oakland local leaders.
Thank you for that. And extremely compelling information when we think about like movement-based work and how like work like the Marcus, Pan-African movement with Marcus Garvey and the Black Panther Party moved through generations and still needs to be lifted up as a relevant point for our children, because even as we go further down the line, the work is still pretty prevalent, but their connection to those practices or those ideas are not necessarily in the forefront of our educational system. So I'm excited that we're having this conversation. And to the point that I think there's a couple of comments that are coming in, but I want to like get some of the questions in that we are addressing. And one of the things I want to lift out is that, the Black Solidarity Movement has a significant impact on some of the other places that we've been in, like the Civil Rights Movement, movements for social justice. And so I'm interested to hear, are there any particular achievements and or challenges in all of these movements that may have contributed to the struggle of towards equality? Or is there a need for equality? And let's just talk about that.
Well, absolutely, there's a need for equality, but one thing I wanted to highlight is that there have been a lot of significant accomplishments in the pockets, like with the Black Panther Party, you know, those accomplishments, starting the free lunch programs and the inner city clinics and stuff. Too often, though, the powers that be, once we stop fighting on those fronts, it recedes back to a smaller, insignificant level, as opposed to spreading all over the country and perpetuating. So the achievements that we've once accomplished, although great achievements, we have to continue to work those achievements. And that's a disconnect through all of the distractions of a society, of our people, the oppression of our people. Because let's get it straight, we were never freed. If we were free, we wouldn't be working all our lives now for somebody else's wealth. You know, and anytime you occupy a job, you building wealth for a family, the owners of that, where you barely making a living, and then you do that for a number of years, retire and die, and the cycle is perpetuated through your children and their children, and through education, which is one of the main fronts that I particularly fight on, is when we don't educate ourselves, when others educate us, we're subject to fulfilling the education that they provide for us. And right now, with the educational system of America, most people know that Rockefeller pretty much designed it and instituted the educational system of America, not to educate the people, but to train factory workers in the industrial age, the workers. Now, we understand how Detroit is a modern day failed state as an example of that education system. When the plants and, you know, all the manufacturers left the city, there's no work for anybody, because it was all based on those factory workers. Most of those factory workers, depending on their age, they wasn't able, had the means to retrain themselves to do something else. When you go to work for 30 years and all you do is, you know, turn a few screws and, you know, put a cherry in or something like that, that's not useful skills anywhere else. So when that plant or that industry closed down in your area, you have to pack up and either move to a different area, you have to retool yourself or re-educate yourself. And we know how the challenges in re-educating yourself when you're not a teenager or 20 something, you know, those are challenges that we face, especially after years of doing something repetitively. So the educational key in the solidarity movement is one of the main fronts that we have to collectively begin to increase the attacks, because right now it's an Operation Word War. It's a war with words, not guns and bullets. It's never been a guns and bullets physical war. It's always been the war to capture the mindsets of our people to where we can do better. We spend trillions of dollars a year, but we don't spend it with each other. We give it away. If we were able to circumvent and redirect those funds to this movement, this solidarity movement, we would be a solid entity. We would be a rich nation, actually, if we're able to do that. So it's the education of our people that is paramount. And it always has been paramount. That's why we wasn't educated, wasn't allowed to be educated during slavery. And I could go on and on. This is kind of near and dear to my work, but I'll pause.
Awesome response. Sister Wondering, do you want to chime in on this piece?
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Ludd, is that I think equality in education and resources and access has been the struggle from the beginning. And I think that, yeah, there are pikes when we're doing good and we're working together and we're collaborating. But it's coming back, because it's a continual need until we get to the point to where it is equal education, equal access. There's always going to be work that needs to be done in the community. And so I would definitely agree that solidarity on these issues, solidarity on being committed to your community. Um, and also what is community, and what it. Unlike Dr. Love, you can go in so many different directions with these topics, but it's true. It's like it's definitely education. I mean, if you don't know your past, and we hear this, if you don't know your past, and you can't really go in your future. Well, it's really true, because if you don't know that there's laws that are passed, if you don't know that there's legal ways to handle certain situations, if you don't know that you have the right to this land, or the right to this access or this resource, then you're not gonna attain it. You're not gonna go after it because you don't know. So education, I would say, is definitely key. And making sure that there's equality with the access to education, and then flipping that is like not just waiting for the access, but working together on some collective movement to make sure that we are educated and that we are passing this education on to our
Absolutely.
youth.
Absolutely. And I want to chime in just 1 second again and say that it is really in our best interest to take control over our educational system, especially the Head Start, the First Start. You are the first teacher of any child, the parents. And the parents have to educate themselves. The reason I became educated is because I became a father. And I knew that when this child can talk, it's going to ask me all kinds of questions. I better get ready for these weird questions. And the process of answering those weird questions put me on a journey of educating, self-educating. I need to be able to have an answer for these, even the scientific questions, an answer, not a BS answer for a child, but a legitimate child. And I found that through that process, when a child wants to know something, if you're able to educate them, they will, 2, 3 years old, they will remember a scientific terms and processes if you're able to teach them. So the younger you teach them, the better off. And so my point is, we have to control the curriculum. We have to control the education system of our people. As long as we allow our children to be educated by our open enemy, this very day, they send billions of dollars to other European countries and other nations when there's no funds for us to improve our communities. Just the homeless people, war veterans, mentally ill, and victim of circumstance, homeless people, there's no money for that. But there's trillions to send overseas for other people who are not in a bad shape, but that's a whole different philosophy. So it's key for us to do our thing. And we cannot depend on anybody to do it for us. And if we do, well, that's why we're in the conditions we are in, because we've been dependent on others to educate ourselves and our children.
And, I'm really just having a great deal of appreciation. And one thing that resonated with me when I started reading this question around equality, the one thing that kind of stood out for me is that there was an intentional effort to make us unequal, right? And so make Black people it's really very calculated for us. Our labor, our bodies, our outputs were extracted upon. And so, what does the work look like in fixing that? And when I say, is there equality, the challenge becomes in whether or not there's equality for people who have done such a bad thing to a great deal or a large amount of people across the diaspora. It's not just here, but across the diaspora. So just naming and lifting that out, what does equality look like for such heinous activities? And so these are the things that I often struggle with in these conversations, because I just feel the need to like what does restore, repair really look like? And is equality the real word that we're seeking? And maybe that's a different context. But when I think Black solidarity, I feel like there's something special about us being able to like create something beautiful and not allow that to be second best, so to say, to some of the things we've seen and experienced. So just lifting that out, and just something that I personally consider and I think about it. These words mean something. What does that actually look like, and what does that actually mean in real life? So thank you, panelists, for sharing these critical things. I want to take us down a little bit of a journey to get us to, like, what does strategy today look like? So as we look at how the Black Solidarity movement has connected to economic power. And so I'm excited about you all being business owners and experience in finance. You all also understand how the dollar works. What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about strategy to foster, like, self-sufficiency and economic growth? Or have you seen some models that work? And feel free to jump in.
Okay, I certainly will. I'm pausing just in case the sister has something to say. I know I have always have something to say, so I don't mind going second. All right. Well, there's nothing changed. There's been tremendous change all over the world over the last 100 years, but the truth of the matter is that all sorts of wealth still comes from the land. And every country's GDP, gross national product, their economy is based on land, labor, and capital. And we as a people possess all the labor. We also possess significant capital. Our problem is we have been dispossessed from the land, and a lot of times voluntarily dispossessed from the land after slavery and after the chains were taken off, because slavery never ended. But after the chains were taken off, we owned, and you can go and research this fact and you'll get various numbers, but all of them agree that we own millions of acres of land. Now we own less than 100,000 acres as a people, as a group of people. It's way more people in the country today, and we own a fraction of what we owned after the so-called slavery ended. And so returning to that major resource, land, with our labor and our capital, we can produce and create communities that are self-sufficient, sustainable. We know we have a whole lot of obstacles to face with the immoral wickedness in society and government and policies and all of these policymakers and stuff. We know that there's an assertive effort to destroy the country, but that has no bearings on us if we directed our resources in the right place. Land, gaining land, working that land. But see, our people don't want to work. And I say that loosely. I'm saying that in general. We would love to work. We don't want to work for them. Okay? I mean, I'm sure that most people who rejecting their jobs, if they had their own business, would work 7 days a week, 12, 13 hours a day, especially if they can see a return from them for themselves. So when I say we don't want to work, yeah, we don't want to work for our slave masters, for our captors, for those people who enslaved us and stole us. And I can go on the list about what they did to us, but this is about what we need to do for us. This ain't about what they did to us. We're still here. We're still able, we're still strong, we're still healthy, despite the effort of killing us all through all of the food, the poison in the water, the poison in the air, and we can go on and on. We're still here. We're still strong, and we can achieve these goals if we focus our resources in the right direction. And that's land. Currently, that's what the missing link. So I'll pause.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. And one thing you kind of alluded to, and I hear you with this generation that we're dealing with now, they're not connected to this workforce. So it sounds like an alternative way to have, an economy is something that would be very appealing to this generation who's not connected to the current workforce. But just something that popped in my head. Wondering, do you want to jump in on this?
Yes, yes, of course, I agree. And it goes back to education, right? And so, and not just education as far as like arithmetic, language, science. I mean, education, a mindset, educating what it means to be independent. We lost a lot too. Generations lost part of that ownership of not knowing how to go after your family's property, how to keep that how important it was to keep that land in the family. We lost like, for example, I'm my grandparents, no, my great grandparents were in Oklahoma. They were one of the families that was there building and had property. I'm in a struggle now with my relatives of trying to express why it's good to keep it. So but it's a mindset, right? And we're so disconnected from that mindset of like where we were before, because we were reactional to what was happening to us in that time. So our mindsets was like independency, getting our own. We need, fueling our local communities, being here for each other, networking with one another. We're so far away from that everybody is in their own singular situation and struggling, still trying to get to those dreams without realizing working together get us there. But I would say that in this day and time, a strategy is education mindset and multiple streams of income, not just focusing on just one income. Like having multiple streams, so if something happens to that stream, you have other streams that are coming down the pipeline. You don't have to we're in a time where you can't, I mean, you can have a great idea and it could be successful and you can be rich. However, that's very rare in these days and times. But if you have multiple streams of income, I think that kind of helps out with the economics and being able to be ready financially to take advantage of some of these opportunities in real estate and in land. And then the education of that, it's one of those things that we don't know about, but it's easy once you know about it, how to present yourself and how to get yourself on the map to real estate, buying land, community trust land. There's organizations right now in our community. We have the East Bay Realty Group. This is a group that goes out and fight for land and properties and make sure that it's renovated and restructured for the people in the community, and it stays in the community and it's not bought by investors that are not local. There's also organizations like RCF who's they're located in Richmond, California, where they're going in and they're buying on the abandoned homes and they're fixing them up and they're reselling them to the community members, and they're giving them lessons on how to purchase real estate, how to get your credit in line. These are all the resources, these are the financial resources that are available at this moment in time, and we're going to hold your hand all the way through. So I definitely agree that it's the education and the mindset and understanding how important it is to have entrepreneurship, several multiple streams of income, and also investing in real estate and land and the knowledge of it as well.
These are some amazing things that I'm taking note of. I don't know about everybody else, but I have like a list of takeaways that's happening here. We got some strategies we can deploy because there are people out there that are doing the work, that are creating models that are beneficial for this solidarity movement. And one of the things that I'm hearing us talk about is really lifting out those works so that it becomes common knowledge and accessible to the next generation. We need a multi-generation word of mouth program, because you know how we used to do it back in our neighborhoods. You talk to the neighbor and it's somebody in the neighborhood that's got all the information. We need to 2.0 that for this generation so that they have access to these resources. So thank you so much for bringing these points to surface. And so the other thing I want to just kind of think about as we talk about this, and we are touching on it. We talk about education and self-sufficiency, but what about like the intersectionality around the Black Solidarity movement? You know, how are we using this work to address the experiences within a variety of backgrounds and identities within the Black community? Are there efforts to ensure inclusivity? And I think this speaks to one of the questions that came into the uh, discussion board about making sure that people know about the challenges of all the people across the African diaspora. It happened, it's a global movement. Black solidarity is not just here, it's global. So any thoughts that you like to share in this space?
Absolutely. Oh, sister, were you about to speak?
No, go ahead. I don't have much to say, but I was just
Okay.
going to say that for me, it's absolutely right. You do have to educate. You have to constantly tell the story of our history and our struggles and our challenges. And for me, what that looks like with Lyric Performing Arts Academy, we have an annual musical. It's called Go Tell It, and it's a musical about Harriet Tubman, and it's based on Christmas, but it's not the traditional Christmas that you think of with the Christmas trees. It was like that was a time when we could go from one plantation to another plantation to visit people, but that was also a crucial time in how people escaped also. So we have a musical with that, and it's an educational piece. So I think that making sure that we keep it relevant and keep history relevant, I would say that that's a way of doing it and keeping it relevant and keeping the history going through the arts. I just wanted to throw that out there. And then I'll pass it on to you, Dr. Ludd.
All right. Well, that is great because pretty much a portion of what I was going to say is that we've done it before in with our arts, with music and various things, art forms, like you're saying, the play and different things. We're telling a story. We'll be doing it in an entertainment way. That's why I named my production company Edutainment, Yisrael Edutainment, because I'm going to entertain you, but there's always some education. And there's always something that you can learn from that. And you know, it's the same deception as putting a little bit of fruit on the tip of the spoon when you got the peas or carrots on that spoon for a baby, where you give them something that's sweet and tastes good and they gobble it down. It's the same principle where you give them something that's entertaining our community, something entertainment, they'll consume it. Too often they're consuming things that teach us the wrong messages with all of this stuff out there. And so dedicated to, you know, being an artist myself and an educator, it's about creating this content now. You know, that's the new catchphrase, creating content for a younger generation that they'll pay attention to, and they'll be able to shake off those mental chains. And this is all about building on that education, but it's not institutionalized education. We have to get the children from 1, 2, 3 years old in the institutionalized education, but the iPad generation, the cell phone generation, the social media generation, the only way to them is through social media, through that medium to where you kind of capture their attention. And then you can begin to, you know, education is about educing. Education, the word education, the root word is to educe. Educe means to bring out something that is present, but is latent. It's deep down in there. Too often in the American educational system, you know, because of Rockefeller, they're trying to put something in the child. They're not trying to bring out of that child that which is innate in their DNA that they were born with. We have scientists that never went to school. We know it as Black History Month. You hear all about the, you know, inventions and the stolen legacies of our people and their inventive ways. And this was like right after slavery. Wait a minute, where did you get educated? You educated yourself. And so that's brilliance that's inside of us. And so when we're able to capture the attention of our people, then we can begin to spread this narrative to the point of beginning to become that unified solidarity movement. And see, that's the key, being able to unify all of the pockets of the movement to an entity to where we're working on various aspects of the same thing. You know, there's battlefronts all over, but we have to consolidate our resources into self-sufficiency, education, taking care of ourselves, as opposed to looking for a handout or marching to get, you know, I say when we march and we ask the government, it's like asking the devil not to be evil. You know, I mean, do we really think the devil, who did black codes, who did Jim Crow, redlining, welfare, all these things that keep us in perpetual slavery, do we really think that that entity is going to, oh, I just changed my mind. I'm not going to be evil anymore to these people. I'm going to just give them anything and everything. Reparations, everybody get $10 billion. Yeah, I don't think so. If we wait for that, we'll be waiting another. It'll be the year 3024, and we'll be, the solidarity movement is still going. No, we can't do that. We have to make some real gains now. Arts, education, that really is part of our culture that they couldn't take away. We don't know how to direct it, but it's still in us. We created the art forms of America. I'm not going to go into that. I could go into that, but. And we also inspired, you know, when we had music of the 60s, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. War all over. It's the same thing today, but there's no music highlighting that. The music is highlighting big round things that people have were born with. You know, I mean, that part of the movement because you're a shapely person, or can we focus our minds on something a little more lofty? You know, so I don't want to get on that soapbox. I do, but I'm not.
Well, I'm appreciating this because we're like we tiptoe into it, but let's step a little bit deeper into the water here because I saw a comment come in the chat about how information is being really filtered into the community, and also really this is the same type of thing that happened. You know, they called it propaganda campaigns and COINTELPRO and all these different things that happened back when the solidarity movements were taking place in our histories. And so you raise a very critical point around if it happened then and where it is something that can very well be happening now. And now with media being as predominant as it is, everybody is being fed information into their hands at a rapid pace today. And so for a person to learn about these histories, to connect to our collective struggle as a people and use that as fuel to actually move from one condition to the other is a challenge. And so I'm loving the idea of content creators with narratives, just as they were when Marvin Gaye's song What's Going On. And so I really would love for us to kind of, I hear that we are a room of artists here. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that because arts and culture play a really critical role. I mean, you spoke to the play. Dr. Lou, you spoke to what's happening, but what are some things we can get our younger generations, even our older generations, like stuff that we can do now to help move the needle on the movement?
I would say like right now what we're doing with the Performing Arts Academy, we're partnering with school districts because they took the arts out of the schools. And so we had our own, you know, faith-based performing arts company, social justice, we perform with a purpose, and we found out that our communities couldn't pay for the service. And we all have full-time jobs, and so we can't fund it 100%. I mean, what was happening is that we were coming out of our pockets to promote the arts, but what we're doing now in this phase, and we did that for several years, and it worked, and we became aunties and moms to the community. We fed the kids, we social social worker situations. We gained nieces and nephews and built a community around that. But financially, we don't make a profit. It's a need, and so you have to come in and knowing and understanding that there's not a profit for it. Now, there's grants, there's fundraisers and things of that sort. But what we're doing now in this phase is we're partnering with the school districts where there's money set aside now due to the Black Solidarity Movement, due to the Black Lives Matter movement. There's now being funds that are being given to the districts, given to the school districts. And now they started reaching out to local artists here in the Bay Area. There's local artist grants. There's so many different things for the artists. And so what we're doing with that is partnering with them, getting the youth the information and still teaching at the same time, teaching our history, teaching our social justice. So it's like your kids are not just gonna come and learn how to sing, they're not just gonna come and learn dance, or they're gonna learn the history of it, where it came from, why do we step, you know, why are we playing the drums? How was the drums instrumental in that process of communication? And so we break everything down, so it's not like you're just going to learn how to play a drum, but then you learn how to play it, but you also know the history behind it, so it sticks with you. And now you know. Now you can go in that classroom where they're not teaching it, and you can say, okay, well, there's another side of this story. This was also what was happening during that time. And so I would say that's what we're doing, is partnering because of the resources and because of just trying to meet more youth, partnering with districts and keeping the dream alive.
Well, it's ironic that you mentioned about taking the arts programs out of the schools, because due to that fact of them taking the arts out of school back in 2004, I believe, or 2004, I started the Neo Jazz School of Music. And the reason I started my music school is because the music programs was being cut so far back to where they was non-existent. And to help combat that in my city, I started a music school. And of course, my music program became world renowned because I used the method of educing as opposed to trying to program a child into, you know, just telling them this is what you do, memorize it. No, you give an environment for a child to explore options and come across the right solutions. And when they come across the right solutions, those solutions are a eureka moment that they never forget. And that's the approach to arts education, because we are artistic people. Without art education, that's a big part of our culture historically, even though we're so cut off and separated from our true culture and our true history, which I call our story, our story. And we're too bound in his story about us, like we were savages and running around with bones in our nose, and you know, and they civilized us out of the jungle, and we know that that's not the truth. So even taking away all of our connection to our true culture, you can't take the DNA out of us. And I spoke about that. We're still these artistic people. All forms of music in America was started by us. Dance, even though they call a music art form jazz was actually dancing before it was a music art form. And I do lectures on the history and the origin of jazz, which is a good way of teaching about the slave revolt, because it came about because of the slave revolt in 1811, I believe it was, or maybe 1816. Somebody could correct me on that. But here in New Orleans, where there was a big slave revolt, and the slave masters felt so uneasy because they almost succeeded in killing them all, that they began to institute that 1 day a week off of work. And there's a historic place here in New Orleans called Congo Square, where the slaves were able to congregate, and they were actually allowed to have drums. And of course, with drums come the dancing. And because of our sisters, our queens dancing, in adoration and praise to the creator for at least a moment of non-work, they would be doing their expressive dances. And of course, the jazz came around from the, the slave masters and the overseers, the white overseers looking upon these dances and masturbating. I mean, that's the reality of it. Now, in certain scenarios, I won't say it plainly. I'll kind of hint to it if I'm dealing with elementary school. But anything above elementary school, the reality of it is the reality of it. Our art form, blues and what's called jazz and what's called R&B and soul and gospel and all that stuff started from Congo Square with the beating of the drums and our sisters praise dancing. I know it's a different thing nowadays, but it's the same thing. It was legitimate. It wasn't an organized dance. They wasn't taught their ancestral dance from Africa, although they were doing the same dances. How did that happen? That's DNA. So I don't want to go straight from the subject. The subject is that how do our culture, which we were disconnected, but because of our DNA, you can't really separate us from the things that make us a people. And we see that in society today, even with our athletic prowess. Wouldn't be no athletics without us. It just would be boring, So to summarize that is that we have to do our part to perpetuate our own culture and our own artistic endeavors. And I've been a proponent of giving young people a venue to express themselves through music, through dance, through poetry, spoken word, through scientific inventions. And there's so many things you can teach while you're teaching music. You'll be amazed. I'll just pause there.
Add on, as you were talking, I was thinking of the pieces that are really, we call famous within Lyric Performing Arts Academy, but it's true. We took a piece and it's called Four Little Girls. You can look it up. It's called Four Little Girls. But within Four Little Girls, we also did Glory, which talks about Trayvon Martin and talks about like what's happening in today's time. And then we also took the poem from Langston Hughes, Kids Will Die. So it's true. You can take a piece and you can take an art form and then they'll remember that. And then for these kids today, it's like, hey, this isn't new. This is what happened, and so it's still a movement. It's still a struggle. It's still something that you need to be aware of, and it's something that you need to advocate for. And then yeah, I think that's it. And I think, and we also teach West African dance. So and whenever we start our shows, we start from the beginning and we explain why we start with the drumming, why we start this way before we go into the rest of our performances. So it's very true what you said, Dr. Ludd, and it is um, very fruitful for the youth, and they're motivated and they love it, and it gives them confidence and gives them knowledge, and then they take it to the next level. So yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I'm loving this. And just for our family that's listening, just realizing that arts and culture really is a tool. It's been a tool that we've used throughout our throughout the entirety of our existence on this landmass for resistance. And even if you go to like maroon colonies and those types of things, the drumming was a way to warn each other and send messages. So it wasn't just the musical art form, it was this innate like way of communicating and sharing the messaging from generation to generation. So as we continue to move in this work, we really need to be weaving in the arts and culture as a means of self-expression, because if we're not controlling that, right, we see the results of what we're getting in mass media with some of the music that we're hearing, with some of the ways our young people are being exploited by these entertainment machines, and it's not like for their well-being. So it's really critical that we're shaping our next generation with these forms of art. And really a big piece of the solidarity movement, it has been from the beginning of our resistance movement to today. And right now, the tool has been used and weaponized against us. And so what we have to really do is start picking those tools back up and using them for our own salvation and own delivery from what we're dealing with the economic injustice. So I do want to appreciate this conversation and do a check-in with Amal on time, just to make sure we're in the right space here. So Amal, just giving you space to chime in as you see fit to get us wrapped up on the time frame we need to be in.
Yeah, we still have time, I believe, till 7:20, so we can carry the conversation onwards. If there are any questions, you can also add that to the chat or the Q&A, and I'll make sure to convey them to the speakers.
And I do want to lift out, there was a chat that I cannot find right now that came in through the Q&A. And this was from Sanaya, and Sanaya asked, and we kind of somewhat addressed this, but I want to give the panelists an opportunity to hear the entirety of the question. Sanaya thanked all the speakers and organizers for the event. Can you talk about the history of Black and Palestinian solidarity? What can we do right now to promote this to those who are ignorant to it? And just, I gave a summary response, and one of the things I realized in doing work around Black liberation and Black solidarity, most of the time, our people are disconnected from the idea that there's a need for a movement now because of all the things. If you're ignorant of your own oppression, it is challenging for you to see the oppression of those closest to you and those that are in your diaspora. So I just want to lift that up. But I think our panelists have named some things, but I would love to hear your feedback in this space.
Well, there has always been a community of us over in our ancestral homeland. Most people don't realize that the slaves of America, that was our original land. And the year 70 AD, we were exiled from the land by the Roman Empire. And we fled south through Africa, all the way around the South African coast, all the way up to the west coast of Africa. And we settled on the west coast of Africa. We lived there 1,400 years as refugees before the slave trade started. And most people only talk about the slave trade of the English in 1611, but the slave trade in this country officially started in 1555. There were Black slaves of our people on Columbus's voyage to this area, and to understand the Palestinian connection. Palestinian is a name like saying Chicago Indian. Like, I was born in Chicago and raised in Chicago, but that's not my heritage or culture. So Palestinian are named after land that was called Palestine, but the culture of the people there is still our people there. They call them Black Palestinians, and they're being oppressed worse than the other Palestinians, the lighter skinned Palestinians. So there's a direct family connection between us and the so-called Palestinians. So that's one of the reasons why we feel connected by what's going on to our people over in that particular area of the world, because it's similar to what went on with us in slavery, except it's just straight out genocide. They're not trying to enslave them, they're trying to kill them. They're not trying, they are exterminating them. And that's just a fact. And so that's our connection. They're exterminating part of our family.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Lude. Wondering?
No, there's nothing much more to say. It has always been a connection between the Black Solidarity Movement and what's been happening in Palestine. It dates back. You can see Dr. King, Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party have all taken it. And like Dr. Love said, it's just like saying Chicago, because we noticed what was happening there and we joined in solidarity. And there's even artist songs that speaks out to it, that speaks out to what was happening during that time with the Palestinians. Yeah, I don't have much more to say. It's always been, and then like Dr. Ludd said, we're still there. There's Afro still there. There's Afro folks still there, and you know, it's very similar. It's not different. So yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it's relevant now because of what's happening. So now it's that opportunity to educate and to go back into the history and talk about it and bridge the gap for the education component of that question. But yes, we've always been, and there's documentation, like I said, with Malcolm X, Black Panther Party, Dr. King, and I'm sure there's other leaders that we can find that had ties and spoke up and was in solidarity with Palestine.
Yeah, I'm appreciating the responses here. And I don't see many questions coming into the chat, but I do want to lift out a few points that were brought into the space today. And I want to give the panelists a moment as I'm bringing these concluding us to think about something you want to offer our audience today, and what that you want, something that you're working on to have them follow you. So give opportunity for that, but also something you want our listening audience to take away. And while you're thinking about that, some things that we brought out in today's conversation was really that education, it has a critical role in continuing the work of the Black Solidarity Movement. Having education around real estate and land programs, knowing how to maintain and have heirs property and land stewardship programs. It's one of the many things we surface, and also understanding our history and the need for it, and knowing all those who came before us in this walk. So just really being important element to continue those conversations with our youth and all those people who may not know. Other thing is there are programs, there are people, there are groups that are doing the organizing. So having spaces where these works aren't siloed, and I want to lift out the National Association of Black Cooperators as one of those spaces that's working to bring that together, and also really elevate the Network for Developing Conscious Communities for their work of have longstanding work of building in Black solidarity and unity. And then keeping the history relevant. We named that relevant history is important, and we can always tell the story through arts and entertainment, and really partnering with organizations that are supporting youth and youth programs. And for those who don't have those capacities to do that work, these works are always needing financial support and resources. So if you don't have the wherewithal to do it, do know that you can support the work of the leaders like Dr. Lude and Wondering in the works that they're doing in their respective areas. And so with that, so many other top points were lifted out in today's conversation, but I want to pass it to our panelists to share something you are working on and ways that the audience can support you, as well as something you want the audience to take away from today's conversation.
I'll jump in because I have to go off camera soon. I'll still be here. I wanted to say that something I would like to leave with everyone that we didn't really tap on heavily is that I think it's very important. And we've also lost our connection, our spiritual connection, and tapping into what that means for you individually. But I think that we focused on the millennials, and we still are focused on the millennials, but we're 2 or 3 generations too late. And so now we have other generations that have not been introduced to anything spiritual, has no spiritual connection. I think that that's very important, and that's something I would like to leave with everyone here, is tapping into that, and helping others tap into it if you have tapped into it. Something that we're working on, we are working with the Oakland Unified School District, called the Oakland Performing Arts Intensive. We're on Instagram, and this is a free program for Oakland residents. If you know any people in Oakland, California, have them go onto our Instagram. I believe our acronym is OPAI. And I'm also trying to, well, we're also trying to, I live in a different county. So we're trying to bring this program to this county. We haven't partnered with the school district, so it would be, we would have to raise money for it. And we're trying to push out some kind of entrepreneur inventors fair. So if someone is already doing that work or want to collaborate with us, please go ahead and look us up. You can send us an email at info@Lyric Performing Arts Academy, and that's arts with an S. And our Instagram, Oakland Performing Arts Intensive. And then my email, if all of that is confusing and you just want to go to one source and be able to email me with your ideas or your supports or partnerships, you can email me at jedefinance@gmail.com. Again, that's jedefinance@gmail.com. And yeah, that's what I would like to leave, is the spiritual guidance and tapping back into that and helping our young folks get back on track with that. Thank you.
Beautiful sharing.
Sorry, if you could also add that to the chat. I know a few people were asking for resources. You could add them to the chat as well.
All right, Dr. Lude.
Right. All right. Well, it's really amazing how we on the same wavelength. We have a spiritual connection, because my takeaway is that spiritual connection. It's the same thing. See, just like she was saying, we're experiencing a generation that have a godless society. The state is the God. Whatever the state say is paramount over any spirituality you may have. So much so that for the last 30 years, I've done research on the solution to all that's wrong with what's going on, not only in the country with our people, but in the world. And I wrote a book about it. It's called Ethics: How to Achieve Heaven on Earth. This book talks about our plight. It gives a historical overview from my perspective as a descendant of a slave that was stripped away from my culture. It also helps you reconnect to our true history, our true culture, which most people consider religion today. But it was spirituality to us when we wrote it in our book that they call the Bible. But this book right here has the answers to the solutions, has the answer for all the problems that's going on today. Also, it will reconnect you on a spiritual level to understand that it's up to us to return to the true culture that we had, which was a spiritual-based culture, by following the instructions of the Most High. And we'll be prosperous people again. We've demonstrated that throughout the years with the Black Wall Street, with the People's Grocery Stores in 1890. It was started in 1887 or something like that. We were barely free. Black codes was in, and we started a grocery store and was prosperous. So once we reconnect to ourselves, and inside the word self is EL. EL in our true language means God. The EL that's in the middle of the SELF, self, is our spirituality. We must regain that spiritual connection again, and we will be a prosperous people. We will win this battle and this war and solidarity. And I guarantee you, this book will help you to make that connection. And it's also how I finance operations. And so you can you can purchase this book. You can visit my website at drlud.life. That's Dot Life, and you can see about my music, about the book, have art, various things that you can do to help move this operations forward. So I thank you in advance.
And thank you for having me as a moderator for this conversation. I want to lift out that Dr. Lute and I are also working on very important project. We think that cooperative economics is one of the many tools that we can use to continue this movement for Black solidarity. And so that said, we are working on a space cooperative called Urban Dream. The Instagram has been shared in the chat. So if you don't have access to own land by yourself, we encourage you to get you a few friends and own land as a collective and do the work together. And it just takes a little cooperating to get the work done. And there are plenty of people who are out here doing the work. I'm one of those many people, and I put my financial services email website in the chat, TMH Financial Services. And I'm thankful to the Network for Developing Conscious Communities, Amal, for you facilitating and having us here. And just want to encourage you all to continue to support these amazing works that Ron Hance and the Network for Developing Conscious Communities are holding.
Thank you so much for the panelists. I don't think we have any questions in the chat. If we do have any questions, we'll continue the conversation. But feel free to add them to the Q&A or in the chat. If not, then I think we can conclude the conversation. I added links and resources that the panelists shared. Feel free to reach out to the Network for Developing Conscious Communities or all of our panelists. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this really insightful conversation. And we're hoping that people took away a lot from this conversation. We also have another webinar tomorrow on Black community development. I think we launched the flyer today as well. So please make sure to join us for that. We have the link also shared on social media on the Network for Developing Conscious Communities, and the topic will be Black community development. And we also have another round of great panelists. So we're looking forward to that conversation as well. Other than that, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Tama, for moderating the conversation. Thank you, Dr. Led and Johandran, for the conversation. Really looking forward to staying in contact with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.